I was born and raised in the Mormon Church. From a kid, I honestly believed that the Mormon Church was absolutely God's only true church on the earth. I believed that we believed the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price, so of course I believed that the Bible taught the same things that Mormonism teaches. I was very devoted to the Mormon Church in my youth, growing up, and was often teased by my fellow classmates who were also Mormons about being a goody-goody. I was trying hard to do what I believed that God wanted me to do as a kid, for the first several years of my life at least. Once I got a little bit older, I started wanting to impress kids more and wanted to fit in better than I was currently fitting in. And I took up swearing and some things like that, which seemed to really impress the kids I was with because they used the same types of language. I was still very devoted to the Mormon Church, though, and remained so up until well past even the time when my parents got divorced, which happened when I was around 12 years old. This was something that really shook my life foundationally, because up until that time, me, my family, my parents, we had attended church regularly every single Sunday pretty much, and we were very devoted Mormons. After my parents got divorced, my mom started going to bars a little bit and smoking and drinking, and there were some different issues going on, and the Mormon Church, for whatever reason, decided that they wanted to excommunicate her. Well, this, of course, to me, shook my whole life up drastically, but she didn't really contest it, I don't believe, and they ended up excommunicating her, and I kind of started to just fall away from my religious real concern for Mormonism. I kind of still definitely believed it was true, but at that point I thought, I want to be where my mom is, kinda, and I wasn't too worried about being so strict observing of Mormonism and their rules and regulations and policies. I did, however, continue to go to the Mormon Church anytime I went to church, which began to be less and less than what it had been, unless, of course, I was with my dad, who remains to this day to be a very devoted member of the Mormon Church. As I was going to seminary, I remember distinctly one day asking a seminary teacher if he thought that my mom was going to go to hell, because after all she had been excommunicated and was smoking and drinking from time to time and whatever, and Mormonism is very, very strict about dumb little things like that. So I asked my seminary teacher if he thought that my mom was going to go to hell. And he told me, well, if she smokes and drinks and stuff like that, yeah, she probably is going to go to hell. And that reconfirmed my whole idea in my head that I didn't really care about going to the Mormon quote-unquote heaven. If my mom's going to hell, I figured I want to be wherever she is. So, again, I continued to kind of drift in my faith in Mormonism, still believing it was true, of course, but not caring all so much about following it carefully. Also, going through the public school system, we were taught evolution and things like that, how supposedly we had came from a monkey, and all animals were supposedly related, and on, nonsense like that. And of course I bought into it. After years and years of having it programmed into you, you start to believe some of it. And I didn't really see how it conflicted with Mormonism anyway, because Mormonism doesn't really teach anything too spectacular. Their God doesn't create anything anyway. He forms spirit children, and then they get formed into physical children by parents on earth, and their gods are totally incapable of creating matter or anything, so they only organize and form what has always existed. And Mormonism teaches that we had always existed as intelligences and things like that, so there was no real concern with evolution to me. I figured, well, maybe evolution happened like trillions and trillions of years ago or something like that, and that's how the first man became a god, and then he created more gods and stuff like that after him, and we were just going to progress to become gods. After my parents' divorce, a lot of things, like I said, were getting shook up very heavily in my life. I had friends, new friends that I made when I had to move to Cedar for different periods of time to be with my dad, who had moved to Cedar. I had grown up in Parowan, Utah my whole life, and then moved to Cedar, the Enoch area. I had a friend that introduced me to some heavy metal music. I listened to some Motley Crue and Twisted Sister, and I remember distinctly listening to songs like We're Not Going to Take It and I Wanna Rock and things like that by Twisted Sister, and that kind of got me into the whole heavy metal thing. I kind of felt the same way those songs were saying. I got very big into heavy metal music, and it really became my life in a lot of ways. I really kind of was aspiring to be, wanting to be, hoping to be a heavy metal rock star as I grew up. I collected all kinds of heavy metal magazines and heavy metal CDs and things like that, and was very much into the music. My attitude was very much changed also at the point of my parents' divorce, pretty much from the time that they got divorced until basically about the day that God really got a hold of my life. I spent pretty much every day of my life wanting to die. And really just wanting to kill myself, kind of, but didn't really have the courage to, I guess. A God thing there. I didn't really want to live, but I didn't really know what was really going to happen after I died, and so I didn't really ever try to kill myself or nothing, although I thought about it over and over again for years and years. As I got older, I had different periods of time where, of course, my attitude being very depressed, I'd have times where my mom knew I was obviously depressed, and I had some different attitude issues, and at one point in time, I remember my mom saying that she thought maybe we ought to get rid of my music. And I was devoted enough to that music at the time that I honestly believe that had she thrown out the music, I probably would have gone along with it, at least for a little while. I don't know how long I really could have made it on my own, but that's how devoted I was. I wasn't going to give up the music for anything in the world. I got a little older, and in high school, getting about ready to graduate high school, the military recruiters came to the high school, and I kind of went and checked into the Army a little bit and talked to a recruiter, I think, a little bit, or filled out some paperwork or something. Somehow the Army got my name and got some information from me because I showed a little bit of interest in the Army. I was at a point in my life where I really was kind of thinking that if I didn't do something, I'd probably end up living at home forever with my mom or with my parents. So a little later on, an Army recruiter came knocking on our door, and I got talking to him and decided that that's what I wanted to do. It just seemed like a good way to make sure I got out of the house when I got older. So I signed up papers, and I was all set, and my mom decided that she'd sign them with me, because when I made up my mind to do something, it was usually pretty made up, and she kind of discouraged me from going into the Army a little bit. I think being a lot smarter than I was, knowing that it wouldn't be quite what I thought it'd be, but I was pretty set on wanting to go in, so she signed papers allowing me to go, even though I wasn't 18 yet. And 7 days after I graduated high school, I was on an airplane flying to be in the Army. I graduated on, I guess it would have been maybe the very last day of May, because I believe I started in the Army on June 7th of 1989 and was in there for 4 years. And of course, when I went into the Army, I woke up in a whole new world. Thought I was actually living in a nightmare, because I had people yelling at me, telling me things to do, and I actually had to do them, and it just kind of felt sometimes like I had died and woke up in kind of hell, although now I know that hell is far worse than that would have ever been, but that's kind of my thoughts at the time. I kind of thought, oh man, I went to sleep one night and here I am in hell, in the Army. And the Army was, for me, something that I didn't really like very much. I think it was important to my life. I believe that's why God let me go in and stuff like that. It taught me an awful lot about things. But it was very hard for me because I had grown up so attached to family and friends and things like that. This really shook me up, being in a place where I had no family, no friends. I realized for the first time that there wasn't anybody within a couple 100 miles or more that really would care 2 bits if I woke up or not the next day. And that kind of bothered me a little bit sometimes. And I actually went into military intelligence, of all things. And people joke a lot, if there is such a thing. But it was interesting. I got to work in the National Security Agency for a little while. Worked at that building for a little over a year, and that was actually kind of fun. And then spent a year in Sinop, Turkey, when Desert Storm came up. Shortly after that had come up, I got orders to go to Turkey and spend a year, a couple days short of a year there, because they were closing down the base kind of as my year was getting up there. And that was hard, because I was made a person, a pretty important person there, and I had a lot of responsibilities doing the job that I was given there, and that added stress to me. And at that point in my life, to get back to some earlier issues, I, of course, as I was departing from Mormonism and going through all these changes, eventually I took up smoking a little bit and things like that. I kind of thought, early on when I first saw my mom do it, I was really not wanting to do it at all. Of course, being a good quote-unquote Mormon, because you're very much taught that that's something that only very, very evil people do. So I didn't really want to do that. I kind of watched all of my brothers and sisters try it out one day, and I remember that I didn't do it at that time, which of course helps build your ego, that you're better than other people, which is what Mormonism is really all about, kind of. Trying to be better than everybody else, hoping that God's going to let you into heaven one day. But I did take up smoking when I got into high school a little bit. I decided that I wanted to do it. I thought for some reason that it looked cool and whatever. I guess all the different movies I had began to watch as things began to loosen up on me and growing up, and my mom wasn't so diehard trying to follow the Mormon rules and things like that, so I started watching a lot of different movies. And of course they glorify cigarettes quite a bit, and alcohol and things like that too. And then of course the heavy metal music. It certainly does its good share of glorifying cigarettes and alcohol and just general rebellion and stuff like that.